am Go Public. We'll start again. Hello, my name is Brielle Pomerantz. I am the Go Public School West Contra Costa Manager of Community Leadership. I'll be facilitating today's session. A little bit about me. I started with Go back in September, but I have about 9 years of early child education experience. And so this topic is near and dear to my heart, working a lot in early literacy work and building those skills. So I'm excited to be facilitating today. Thank you so much to our panelists. I want to welcome you all and taking the time to join us and share your knowledge with us. So our panelists today is Barbara Wenger, Ibris Maciel, and Logan Williams. And I will turn it to you to introduce yourselves. So we'll start with Barbara. If you could take a minute to introduce yourself and tell us about your work, how it's connected to our topic today, and how long you've been working sort of in the field of education.
Okay, great. Hello, thanks for coming out today. My name is Barb Wenger, and I'm the mother of 2 sons who are in their 20s now. Both of them started out with difficulties in reading, and 20 years later, they're doing great. I am a teacher. I taught for 14 years in Berkeley schools in 1st grade and 4th grade. And now I'm over at Lincoln Elementary in Richmond. I'm teaching 1st grade dual language immersion, DLI. And I love teaching and I love writing. And in 1st grade, it's when the kids come in and they lose their teeth in 1st grade and they learn how to read. And there's nothing more exciting than watching kids feel so excited and so proud of reading their first words or reading their first sentence. I'm a nerd for this kind of stuff. I love learning how to teach reading better. And I've been super excited about some of the work that we've been doing over at Lincoln. And I'm super excited to hear from the other panelists about what they've been learning. Thanks.
Thanks, Barb. Ibris.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ibris Maciel, and I am the program assistant over at the First Five Center in San Pablo. I have been with the center for about 10 years now. And just like Barbara mentioned, there's also awesome milestones that I get to see from 0 to 5 years. There's a lot going on. And I love our program because we don't just tell you what needs to be done or accomplished for success, but most of our classes also show you how to do it. So I'm glad to be here, and I hope that I can answer as many questions that you might have and share a little bit of information about our center.
Thank you, Ibris. And Logan.
Hello, everybody. I'm Logan McWilliams. Most people call me Mac. I have taught in OUSD as a teacher. I taught all grades TK to 2nd for 8 years, and then I left and started my own homeschool. And now I am back with the district as a literacy coach. I also do some consulting work for different universities around literacy development, specifically for African-American students who speak AAE. And reading has always been my passion. Back when we used to think you either had a reading brain or a math brain, I was the reading brain champion. I now spend a lot of time on Khan Academy brushing up my math skills, but very excited to be here representing the district, and happy to learn from the other people on the panelists, as well as share what I've learned thus far in the work.
Great. Well, thank you and welcome. So we're going to start with our youngest learners, our birth to preschool age children. Again, near and dear to my heart. So this is a busy time for any family in their life. What are the most powerful things that adults in a child's life should focus on to set them up for success when they reach elementary school? And we're going to start with you, Ibris.
Thank you. So, yes, it is a busy time, but the important thing is that you don't have to set a time for this. Early language and literacy skills are at this age are learned with everyday moments. Hopefully, you guys have gotten a chance to hear our little tune on the radio or on TV, and hopefully, it's stuck in your head because it really is about talking and reading and singing to the little ones at this time. Again, you don't have to set a time for it. It could be done while they are getting their diaper changed. It could be done during dinner time. It could be done as they're washing their hands. There isn't a set time that needs to be addressed as the time to learn to read or to learn communication skills. So anytime that you have anything on your mind, speak out loud because your little one is listening. Now, if we want to talk about 0 to 12 months specifically, we want to start showing them books. They love to explore books, and if they have a lot of sensory on them, then that's going to be great. Some of them, there's book out there that have scents to them, so that they can also develop that skill and that familiarity with the book. If we want to go over now with 1 year to 2-year-olds, let's start seeing which one is their favorite book. And if they ask you to read it over and over and over, we encourage you to do that because they learn through the repetition. Also, if you want to switch it up a little bit for them, make up your own story for that exact same book every night. It might be the same book because they're used to holding it, but you have the power to change the story. The important thing is what they're hearing. So as long as they're hearing different words, a different way of saying or describing things, that's what's going to stick with them. And that's what they're going to pull from once they're in school and they're asked a certain question. So that brings us to like 3 to 5-year-olds. Once we know that they can respond and they have a little bit more vocabulary, we want to focus more on open-ended questions. We don't want to stick around with the yes or no answers. I mean, unless that's what we need to hear at the moment, but we want to get their gears going. We want them to think about their answer. It's not just a one-worded answer. We want to make sure that they know how to put all of those different techniques that we taught them from birth up to 3 years, so that they can communicate what they need. Because let's remember, when they start school, you won't be there to do the explaining for them. So we want to make sure that they get enough practice with you so that they can speak up to their teachers and communicate what they want.
Great. Thank you, Idris. Logan or Barbara, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think she said it all. And as the first 5 panelists, I said there you go.
Very good. Very good. Yes. And I, as an early child educator myself, I second and third it. So
Yeah.
many
I agree.
Oh, yeah.
One thing that we've been learning in reading these days is about how important listening to sounds are and being able to distinguish the sounds in words. And so one thing that we're encouraging parents to do is play with sounds. And it could be the kind of things like, hey, close your eyes, listen, I'm going to drop something. What did I drop? And maybe it was a coin, maybe it was a spoon. Tap your fingers, tap your foot. Getting kids to be aware of sounds when they're super little helps them then be able to hear sounds in words. And it's, if you can't hear the sounds in a word, like each sound, it makes it really hard to read those sounds then. Yeah. And then the one other thing we've been learning about that you referenced, Idris, is just building that background knowledge. And just what you said about asking open-ended questions. It could be going to the store, it could be going to the park, but like every single moment, like, hey, check out that food. What do you think about that? Or but just like giving them as much information as they can, because they found in reading that once kids learn how to decode and actually read the word, kids who don't have that background knowledge don't do as well. Because reading, like you said, Idris, isn't just about, it's not just about reading the word, it's about thinking. Yeah.
Great. And something else that I used to do with the older preschool age children, similar to that, is we would create our own stories. So like having them build it. And so building literacy in that way. And then they would make illustrations, and then they would want to revisit the stories they created. So again, creating that love of learning. So building in that way from the early years to when they're a little older. Okay, so our next question. Many families on today's call have a home language other than English. What are your thoughts on strategies families use when developing literacy skills in home and a language other than English, so their home language? Are there specific strategies to use when preparing your child for an English-only elementary school program or versus like a dual immersion or a dual language program? Anyone can jump in.
I was just going to say a lot of what I've been learning and doing a lot of research around is developing oral language and really encouraging families who, speak a different language other than English or a different dialect other than classroom English to really encourage developing the child's oral language skills in their home language. If they just get them talking in their own language, and those skills will be able to not necessarily, we don't want to use the word code switch anymore, because it gives this kind of idea that you're turning off all of the language skills you have in your home language in order to then bolster on standard or general English. And that's not really what's happening in the brain. The brain is able to use all of the skills from the home language to strengthen their written language and print language skills when they're reading in school. And so, as they were saying earlier, it's really about getting your child to start thinking and talking out loud about language, about the books that they're reading, about their experiences. And even if you are not a confident English speaker or reader as a parent, it irrelevant. You can still support your child's literacy development by talking, and also getting them to write more, getting them to illustrate more. The more that you can talk about a subject, the easier it will be for you to read about that subject. And the more that you can draw, the more detail that you can draw about a subject, the more detail your writing on that subject will be. And so I usually really encourage families who are not feeling that confident in their English ability to focus on developing oral language skills in their home language or dialect.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts, Barbara, Ibris?
For new parents, if they're, also trying to decide what language to speak to their child, if there's multiple in the home, we always tell them to start. There's two techniques that we recommend. It could be one parent, one language technique, and that way the child is being introduced to both of them. If the parent speaks only a different language that is not English, then we encourage them to give that first language as a foundation for the child. The child's brain is a sponge. So they are going to be seeing English in school with their friends, out and about. But the value of that other language is going to come from the home. So we do encourage parents that stick with their first language from birth to 5 years, if that is possible. And sometimes I also just tell parents, read up on how you are going to encourage your child to continue learning for maybe 1 or 2 months while they're hearing English or an overwhelming amount of English for the first time. Don't try to accommodate them to a Spanish only because they only know Spanish, because it will only be a difficult time for them for maybe 1 or 2 months, and then they'll pick it up. But then they'll also have the foundation that you gave them of that first language, and they'll be communicated in both. I'm a product of that. I only spoke Spanish for the first 5 years of my life, and within a few months I picked up English, and right now I'm able to switch back and forth between both of them. And I think that my parents did it without knowing that they were doing it.
Great, thank you, Ibris.
I would just add that when a kid is in that second language for the first time, they come home really tired. Like the kindergartners and first graders and second graders, it's a lot of work. So they come home super tired. Make sure they get enough sleep.
Great. So what are some key milestones in literacy development that parents and educators should be aware of and monitor do you guys have any resources families can access to monitor their child's reading development? And Logan, we'll start with you.
Great question. So actually, OUSD created a website for parents and community members, along with Oakland Literacy Coalition. Hi, Julia. In order to be able to focus on reading development, specifically around like, where should my child be? What skills should they have? And I'll drop it in the chat, but that resource is oaklandreads.org. And so let me put that in the chat now before I forget. Oop. Oh. Something, oh, that's it. That's the web, oaklandreads.org. And what you can do is go on this website, put in your child's grade, and it will show you exactly what literacy milestones to focus on at that grade. It will give you video examples that are like family facing for how to work on those skills at home as well. And a lot of them can either be used with materials you're already going to have around your home, or very easy general materials that you could just ask your child's school or classroom teacher for, and they'd be more than happy to give them to you. And so, but more specifically, all of the skills across TK to second, they spiral up. You're kind of working on the same skill, but going deeper and deeper into the content each grade. And like Barbara was saying, one of the main skills is sound awareness. In school, we call it phonological awareness. When you are, before you start school, it's really focusing on whether or not you can tell the difference between, I like to start with like toddlers with animal sounds. They're really good at being able to tell you that's a cat, that's a cow, that's a dog. They can imitate those sounds. And as they get into TK and kindergarten, when you're starting to map those sounds to letters, it makes that job so much easier. And then when you're in your first grade and you are blending all of those sounds and breaking up all of those sounds in more complicated words, it really helps you to be able to transfer oral language or what you hear into now what you're going to see in print. So that's just one milestone, sound awareness, but it's a pretty big one that is easy for a lot of people to work on, even if you don't have like an educator background.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Logan.
I'd like to just maybe what you're like, I didn't know Oakland did that. That's amazing. I just dropped in something also called Great Schools, because they also have little video clips on listening to kids who are reading at grade level or reading sounds. So it's little video clips. And the one other thing I was thinking that you might have at your school is the STAR test. I know in West Contra Costa, most of the schools are doing the STAR testing, and I just want to pop that up on the screen for a second to show you what it'll look like. Reading panel. I think this is it. Yeah, so it's just very small print, but I just wanted to show you, in addition to seeing where your kid is at, the dotted line is what is grade level, and then the line that the kid is on is below. Or it might look like this, with showing in colors where your child is at. But the thing to really look at is down below that I have circled. It's called domain scores. And then it has exactly what you're talking about, the phonological awareness or hearing sounds, like where your child is at that. And then the word recognition, which is like, can they decode? Can they read the word? And then the other stuff, the literature, those key ideas or vocabulary acquisition, all of that is where you get to that thinking stuff. Like, is your child able to understand what they're reading? And so you can talk to any of your teachers and get those tests from your teachers. It's a really easy printout.
Great. Great, thank you. As a follow-up to that, again, we know every reader has their own trajectory and timeline of development. So in looking at maybe those assessments or noticing about your child, when should parents become concerned about a child's literacy development, and what indicators should they be monitoring? I know we said phonological awareness is one of them. Are there others that maybe parents should be aware of?
I just want to mention that over at the First Five Center, we have something called the Ages and Stages questionnaire. Your pediatrician might have offered it to you as well, or maybe just asked you the questions that are on it to so that they can see how your child is developing. And there is one available every 2 months because their skills and their milestones are changing. So we want to make sure that we are challenging them to the next milestone that they're going to be meeting in the next 2 months. And so it's based on the 5 areas of development. So socialization, problem solving, communication, fine motor skill, and gross motor skills. So sometimes parents are afraid to take these questionnaires because it's gonna perhaps let them know that their little one is a little bit behind in an area. But if it's not knowing it's the power. Now you can jump in and help them out. And at the center, we are going to give you the activities that you should be doing with them so that they can catch up on that milestone or on that developmental area.
Great. Thank you, Udis. So we've already talked a little bit about like if your family feels that their child is not on level, sort of what they can do. Any other thoughts of ways of what families can do if they're noticing those things? Are there other tools?
I would just add that if parents have a concern, not to wait to talk to the teacher. And if their classroom teacher, if it doesn't feel like they're being listened to go to someone else in the school, a former teacher, go to the principal, go to the community schools person and ask. My experience is that a lot of times parents don't ask. They have these worries, but they don't feel confident in going in and saying, hey, tell me, is my kid on level, and what do I need to do to get them there? And then just the only other thing is kind of like what you said, Iris, is like having that knowledge. If your child is behind, to not worry. Like kids learn to read, and having the tools to help them read is what needs to happen. Like, but they're gonna read.
Great.
I was just going to add that if you are clear that you're working on literacy at home and that you are confident that your child's teacher is adequately working on literacy at school, and you're not seeing the growth that you're expecting, I just want to piggyback off of what Barbara said, which would be to talk to your child's teacher or to the administrator on site. There is no shame in having testing done. Sometimes kids need extra resources in order to access the literacy skills that they're being taught. And all you need to do is go to your administrator or your teacher and put in writing that you would like to have them tested to see if there's any other resources they can have access to. And I believe legally they have about 60 days to get that done for you. So it's not something you want to wait on. And it's not something that we want to wait on. We want to be able to catch anything that is needed in order to give your child extra support as soon as possible. So have no fear or shame around that either. And I think to Barbara's point, if you are not confident that your child's teacher is adequately, developing their literacy skills, speak to the administrator, speak to former teachers that you have relationships with, find out about community resources where you can, begin to get your child the help that you feel that they need. At the end of the day, like, you want your child to be a confident, independent, fluent reader, and there are plenty of resources to help you guys do that.
Wow, that's awesome. I would just piggyback on that, particularly for bilingual kids. A lot of times the schools say, no, they're fine. It's just they're learning English, and not do anything around testing until 4th grade, at which point the kids' own self-esteem and where they are is far behind. And so parents of kids who are bilingual, that's something especially to watch out, because you might have schools saying, don't worry about it. It's just that they're learning English. And then the one other thing, I know parents, when it's called testing, like to ask for testing, the paperwork says special ed. And I know that for a lot of parents, like how we grew up, like special ed is like, oh, I don't want my kid in special ed, but it's just the name. It's just the name for this huge program. Um, yeah, so don't be afraid of hearing that word.
And more often than not, um, it is, in a sense, rare for a child to have a condition, for lack of a better word, apologies if that's offensive to anyone, that is preventing them from developing their literacy skills. It's more likely that you would reach out, ask for support, and they would say, oh, thank you for noticing this. We're going to put them in an intervention class, a resource class where they're going to spend 30 minutes outside of the classroom to get some extra help in addition to what the teacher is giving them. So there are a lot of pathways, like Barbara said, that are just kind of all funneled underneath special ed, but it is not a labeling or a moniker or something that follows them more often than not.
Yeah, and just to our little plug, if you have questions about special education, we actually just published a Parent's Guide to Special Education, which will sort of break down those timelines that you were talking about when you reach out for support, and to learn about the individualized education programs, or IEPs. So a portion of this, of the guide, was tailored specifically for schools and families in West Contra Costa, but the bulk of it does focus on California sort of state level special education laws, guidelines, and rights. And we have that on the screen now, and we can also drop it in the chat. But I was gonna bring it up later, but you guys brought it on topic, so I just want to plug that we have some support for families that have questions about that, or what is that process. When you are noticing maybe something is happening and you have more questions. So with that, let's say we're noticing things, or we're having those conversations with teachers as we plan for summer, when kids may or may not be in a program or in school. How can we use this data that we've collected, either in their STAR testing or their iReady testing, or in any kind of questionnaires? How can we take that data, and how can we let that information drive your summer strategy? How do you can support them?
I actually think I would recommend the website again. I think when you get that data at the end of the year, and if you ask for like that STAR testing results, like Barbara showed, on the website, it also has like domains. And I know Julia can speak more to this. She's worked so hard on it, along with OLC. But like, for example, I saw in that report where they received like a yellow in the phonics section. You can go on the website, click on phonics, and we'll give you all of these activities, resources, questions to ask. I think we're working on getting like book lists. I think Mr. Cooper asked for different books and things like that. And so, but much like Ibris added, I wouldn't look at it as, unless you're like me and having a daily schedule brings you joy, I wouldn't look at it as, all right, from 11 to 1, we are working on literacy. You can't do anything else. You're not having any fun. I wouldn't look at it like that. I think everybody in the summertime is like, chill, give me a break. So I would just think about it as trying to figure out, now that I know what to work on, how do I want to enmesh this in our daily life organically? Because really, the idea that what we want for our children is not just for them to be competent readers. We want them to be lifelong learners so that they end up being their own teachers. And the only way to do that is to kind of remove this idea that schooling and learning happens at a specific time and in a specific way. I think now that you know what to do, it's about just enmeshing that in your life, making reading and literacy learning just a part of everyday life while you brush your teeth. Put those, what are those things called? High frequency words all over the house, and Anytime they want a snack, put the right on Sharpie, the words on the snack or the sounds, and have them say it. Like, it should just be a part of their constant experience of being alive and in your home in the summertime.
I had a student whose dad put high frequency words on the door, and the kids couldn't go outside until they read the words.
I mean, it sounds effective.
For our parents, sometimes, there isn't a summer break when you have little ones 0 to 5, you're with them all the time. But if you happen to have children that are in 2 different age groups, have the older one read to your baby. Maybe you can have their reading time be while the baby is sleeping, and the baby is still listening to those words while they are taking their nap. If they do have to or request to watch a show that they enjoy, turn on the captions. They'll be seeing the words and enjoying what they see. So yeah, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Have the older one read to your little one, or tell stories or summarize what they read if they prefer to do silent reading, and then have them come there, talk to their little sibling about what they read. All of those words are also going to be absorbed by the little one, and you get a break.
And don't underestimate the power of singing either. Song, I know that Iberis mentioned that earlier.
I was gonna say, don't sleep on Gracie's Corner on YouTube. Okay? It's a resource.
Wonderful.
I super appreciate you talking about how you don't need to be structured, because I always, as a parent, we get the report card at the end of the year and we're like, they're not reading. And then we'd feel bad. And like the first day we would do a lot of things in the summer, and then it would just go downhill from there. Yeah. So, and just what you, Ibris, you'd said earlier, just like talking and getting your kid to talk no matter where you're going. And the things that would super help them out for when they go into the next grade is make your kid use detail, like describing something more than it's good or it's bad or it's purple. Like make them add more and more detail, and then make them give their opinion, not just like, I want to have pizza tonight. Like, why do you want to have pizza tonight? The using detail, giving their opinion, will help them a lot in the reading and writing work that I'm doing in the classroom. I am going to add 2 things that I think would super help out teachers and kids. One is if your child is going out of kindergarten and they don't know their letter sounds yet, to pick a few sounds every week, like make sure they have the vowel sounds down, or make sure they have the M and the N sound down. That would super help them out and help the teachers out. And then the one other thing is coming back, Mac, to what you were saying about the hearing the sounds in the words. There's a program called Heggerty that in West Contra Costa, a few of our schools are using. I don't know if you guys are using it in Oakland, but they have videos for every day through the summer, and I'm gonna post that. They're about 8 minutes long, and what we're doing as teachers in the classroom, there's a video clip of the same teacher cutting those sounds and changing sounds. And you could watch that on the phone. You could have your child watch that on the phone. You could watch it on a tablet and watch it with your child and make them do the hand motions and make them say the sounds. But I think if kids had that, it would help. It would help a lot when they get back in to school.
And
Great.
lastly,
Yeah.
I'm horrible at this, so I am being a hypocrite. I'm going to name that. Because I'm a teacher, what I was going to say is, during the school year, everything that a child gets exposed to book-wise is required. Like, this is what we need to read. This is what you have to talk about. And so I would encourage you to not be like me and spend the summertime letting them read what they want, letting them talk about what they want. If it is Captain Underpants, lean in, okay? if the more that they like it, the more they're going to want to talk about it, the more they're actually going to want to read it. Because ultimately, you want to, a lot of times, I get really focused on building the skills of reading and not building a love for reading. And if you don't love to do it, you're not going to do it. And so the summertime is also a really great time to really get to know your child and what they are interested in. Like she was talking about details. I know too many children who could give me every detail in the world about Roblox, and I will have no idea what they are talking about. But like I said, the more they can talk, the more they can read about it, the more they can draw about it, the more they can write about it. And so when you're wanting them to work on their writing skills, why don't you write a plot in Roblox that happened this week and give me some really good illustrations? Let's write a Roblox story about, you know, how you, I don't know, save the city. I don't really know how Roblox works, but let it be really driven by their interests. A lot of times in school, we are focused on exposing them to complex text, and that requires just automatically that we have them reading some things that they're not that interested in. It's kind of like, you know, as the adult, you know how much you want to instill in them and want to teach them, and they're like, please just leave me alone. So during the summertime, I really encourage, do all the things we're saying, but do it with the content that they are interested in, not the content you are interested in for them. Save that for the other 10 months of the year.
Yeah, and I think someone in the comments had a question, and that was actually going to be my response. They were asking for recommendations on books, and I would say that your little one knows what they want the best, the most. So if you go over to the library and let them pick what they are going to be reading, if it's little ones that are not reading yet and you're going to be doing the reading, let them pick even a very difficult book, and you guys just look at the pictures and make the story as you go along. They're going to sit and listen because they were initially interested in those pictures. Also, if it is a safety concern, little ones, the hard books, that's what's best for them. And we're not expecting them to hold it up and read it. They're probably going to be licking it and put it in their mouth, but we want them exposed to the books at all times.
Amazing. Yeah, to build on that, I know something that we used to do, either when they were writing a story or to check sort of comprehension of their story, is say, and then what happened, and have them describe it and keep on pulling for those details. That's my favorite phrase. And then what happened? Tell me more, because they also get so much pride in being able to share that with you. They get so excited when they're talking about the things that they're passionate about and they love. So again, building that love of learning.
It shows that you're interested in what they're saying. That gives them a sense of pride as well.
Absolutely. All right. How do we feel about resources like workbooks or things that you can pick up at a bookstore or at Costco? Do we feel like those are useful, that those have an impact?
For my little ones, they learn through play. So you play a lot of sensory. It's really hard for them to sit down and do a workbook. But again, learning through play and explaining to them even math concepts, which one's heavier. So it doesn't have to be a 1 + 1 equation. It's more, which one's heavier? That's already introducing them to math, asking them which one do you think is going to float. So for little ones, I would stick through to play.
Great.
I agree for the younger kids. When I taught TA, I really got some really great training on play-based learning and saw how there was no reason that it shouldn't be done or couldn't be done K-12. I also think for K-2 students who are in school, I've always liked the Brain Quest books. I've given them to certain students who I knew didn't have access to summer school or to internet or things over the summer. And it was also a really like easy, accessible way for some families to help their kids stay on track, or to even get a sense of what should we be working on, what should we know. And so many of the skills that you're learning in really K1, but also up to second grade, they require a lot of repetition. They require a lot of exposure. Like your handwriting gets better because you keep working on handwriting. And it's not to say that you can't do that through writing stories that, you know, you come up with on your own. But I think there are certain skills that are developed well through structured, repetitious learning. And so I think play-based is great. I think sometimes that can feel a little overwhelming for parents, working parents, parents with different different living conditions, and to be able to go to Target real fast and get that $12.99 workbook that has 500 pages in it. We are not going to run out of pages. It's a really good kind of safety net for students' development, as well as parents being able to have something that they can easily go to help their kids at home. Khan Academy is another great website, as well as, I know that Zern doesn't do literacy right now, but there's also numerical literacy, and Zern.org is a really good resource for that as well.
Great.
I super
Logan.
appreciate you saying, talking about how that structure around having a book or something to practice handwriting. It's really hard for a teacher to work with 24 kids on their handwriting. And so the more one-on-one that kids can get, I put in the chat, 2 websites, one for Spanish and one for English, on handwriting, to show like really the correct way of writing the letter that allows a child to be the most fluent. And you think handwriting, whatever, but it is, they show that kids that have better handwriting are able to read better as well. And so practicing that handwriting fluency actually helps with the reading as well as the writing.
Great. Thank you. So we've come to the end of our preset questions. So again, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat or the Q&A section, and I'll read them aloud, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. And I see one for Logan in the chat right now. So how do I know what level of BrainQuest to buy for my child? If I have a rising second grader who's behind, do I buy the first grader or the kindergarten book and pick up missed skills, or go forward to try to prepare for what's to come? So how do you gauge that?
Great question. I was responding in the chat, but I'm glad you brought it up out loud.
Yes.
That's a great question. I think that let me start by saying there's benefit to both. There's benefit to bolstering skills that they're going to have when they get into second grade. There's also benefit to sealing up skills from previous grades. I think if I was going to give an answer, I would say it sounds like you're already pretty clear around where they are. You know that they're behind and around what grade level skills they currently have. And I would spend the time at home sealing up the missed learning from previous grades. Because at the end of the day, I think that is what's going to make the second grade experience a lot easier, smoother, and help them to be a more confident reader. Because when you get into second grade, you're talking about, and I think it's also a recommendation I have specifically because they're a rising second grader versus a rising kinder or first grader. When you get into second grade, they're going to be really focusing on syllable patterns as well as morphemes. Morphemes is a really fancy word for small units of meaning, like prefixes, suffixes, root words, and base words. And that is kind of like this very intense introduction to more formal comprehension understanding and less of the decoding. Their decoding skills are supposed to be like rapid and automatic so that they're focused more on the meaning of these small affixes in order to develop them being able to read multisyllabic words and more complex vocabulary. So I specifically would recommend that at home, you are sealing up those decoding skills so that they're not using so much of their brain power to figure out what this word says, and they can focus more on what these words mean. Hopefully that answers your question.
Great,
Oh, that's
thank you.
awesome. That exactly on. And the other thing is that as a first grade teacher, I've got some workbooks that I haven't been using all year, and there's a because I didn't have the number of kids that they expected, that I could give to parents, and I assume other teachers do too. You could always ask your teacher, hey, do you have any extra workbooks that kids haven't used, both for English or literacy and for math?
And sometimes for many different reasons, for example, the strike right now, the child's workbooks that they were working on in school, they never got through the end of them. So even then, that's like prime content that you know is that grade level that's already ready for them and they're used to using that. Because like a lot of times that can be another barrier with trying to help your kids at home, having to get them used to a completely different program or completely different structure than what they were used to doing every day in school. So I would also ask your teacher, like, are there any of their workbooks that they didn't finish this year, that, you know, content you didn't get to that we could have?
And digitally, in West Contra Costa, there's a few programs that we've been using. One in Spanish, for Spanish, it's Imagine Español, and for math, it's Happy Numbers. And those, the kids are going to have access to those programs, I believe, through July, maybe. So they could, if you have your child's login information, they can work off of those programs work off of phones or tablets.
Great, great, thank you.
And
We have another, oh, go
it
ahead.
does
Logan.
cost a fee. I'm not sure if you might be able to get it for free if your school already has an account, but IXL.com has these really quick, easy practice skills that kids can work on, and they break down a grade level into like a million trillion skills that you could focus on. And I know that like a parent account costs money, but a lot of schools have licenses. So your child probably already has an account under their name, and you could continue to use that during the summertime as well.
Great. So we had a question come in the chat that sort of ties into all that. So what is the panel's thoughts on sort of tech-based programs versus paper books and pencils and paper activity? So the more digital versus analog. And what are the pros and cons to one strategy versus the other, or is there, you know?
I think for me, when it comes to the tech versus analog conversation, my only, I guess, pull for the analog is really around handwriting. That's where the big juicy difference comes into play. Outside of that, I think the issue is just like placing more value on one than the other. I think they both have pros and cons, and both are useful tools. It's kind of, if you lean more into one and the other, then you're just not getting the full grasp of what a 21st century learning experience is like. In ways that it wasn't like for myself when I was learning how to read in the early 90s. It's very different now. And so I think that it kind of does a disservice to not find the happy medium for yourself between both. But I think my main gripe is people shying away from handwriting and cursive. Like, we are always going to need these skills, people. Like, please teach that. Do what you need to do on the iPads, but do not forego handwriting and cursive.
Amen.
Yes.
For little ones, I would say absolutely no screens if possible. If they are going to get some screen time, it should be with parents, telling them what they're seeing, with, you know, describing what's going on, what they're seeing, asking questions if they're watching a favorite show. But if, you know, there's programs for like 3 to 5 year olds sometimes where they're tracing the letters in on their iPad or their tablets. I would say you get a better benefit from sand on a tray and having them trace the same letter or the letters of their names. Also making a bracelet. So any activity that's going to help with their fine motor skills, develop their fine motor skills, is what's going to help them later on when they start in school to grab that pencil. If they're in the 3 to 5 age range, then we can start introducing them to, say, scissors. All of the fine motor skills are not supported with any type of device.
Preach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just want to emphasize the idea of the scissors. I think back in my day in school, we cut all the time. And now there's hardly any space in the school day in first grade in the curriculum where you're cutting. And you can't believe like kids can't cut because they haven't had the experience. And so like, buy your kids scissors and make them cut everything around that's that's able to be cut.
Yeah, get the newspaper or the grocery list and have them create what they want for dinner, cut it out and tape paste it on a plate. And then, you can try your best to make that for dinner. So they'll have a lot of fun with that stuff that probably is going to go in the recycle anyway.
Yes. But with supervision for the young ones. I remember there were a lot of cut socks and cut hair. So a couple other questions. Are there group games for children, again, preschool through second grade, that they can play with friends to build vocabulary through play? Are there games or other things that children can do interacting together?
Not that I'm aware of offhand, but I have been out of the
Mhm.
classroom for a while.
Mhm.
Two things. One is jump rope games or hand games that they can learn the pattern. Like that's just totally developing all of these skills that will help kids in reading and writing. And the second game is more of a counting game. If you pick a number, like depending on where your child is, but pick a number and go between 2 or 3 people where let's say the number is 12, start at 5. And so I'd be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and just keep going. Each kid says a number and see who makes it to 12. And the person who makes it to 12 has to sit down. And then you count again. But just those counting games that involves everybody adding up, and if your kids can count forward, then do the counting game of counting backward.
For me, it's not a game, but a recipe, following a recipe. They'll get the text from whatever's going on, of course, with some parent support, parent supervision, or even you describing the type of building that you want, and then they'll build it with blocks or with Legos. They can work together and create that. So yeah, I would say together and following recipes is a good one.
A game that I have played, or I guess forced people in my car to play countless times, I just called it the syllable game, and I think that it would be really great for vocabulary development. I'd say for older kids, each person has to say the next word and it has to start with the next letter of the alphabet. And the first round is all one syllable words. So I may say at, the next person says ball, the next person says cap. You have to go through the whole alphabet. And then once we get to Z and back around to A, now it's 2 syllables. And then, people are getting out people are just, getting annihilated the farther we go up into the syllables. I would say for younger kids, it could be simply needing to name words that start with certain sounds. That helps to develop vocabulary. When you get into second grade, like I said, the morpheme knowledge is going to be chef's kiss for your child to help them as they progress into the upper grades. And so if you can get them to make up words using different prefixes and suffixes and roots that they've learned. I remember I did a read-in for some 4th graders, I believe they were, and I was going to read a book around anti-racism, and so I taught them what the morpheme anti meant, and then they all came up with their different words. It was anti-broccoli, anti-cell phone, anti-everything, and it was just such a great way to get their brains just like it was such a simple pre-reading activity, and they were just enthralled by the idea that they could make up their own words. And I was like, all words are made up. Like everybody just made up these words. Like you can make up your own words. And so that was a really fun one for older kids as well. And you can start
Great.
working work in kindergarten. Like you could start with anti. That's a really great one that kids, can relate to. Anything you don't like. I'm anti bedtime. I'm anti this, So getting them to just really work with language, I would agree. I am also anti broccoli, Nadia. So yeah.
I'm very pro broccoli.
That's great. It kind of fits into the game of categories where the person who's in charge, like for that round, gets to throw out a category, 4 legs. And then everybody has to keep saying what has 4 legs until the last person standing. And you can do that with feelings, or you can do that with weather or trees. But just like having kids be able to think in categories is another reading skill that totally serves them when they're starting to do the comprehension work.
Great. And I think also the use of sort of tying into the play-based manipulatives and different things like telling a story with things and then having them take that on. We used to do felt board stories, but in your house, if you have figurines or stuffed animals to sort of model and then let them do their own to sort of build on that. It's what sort of that reminds me of. Lots of in the comments. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's also very easy to make an impromptu bingo or tic-tac-toe game. The bingo version, you could just kind of prepare some vocabulary that all the kids are working on, and do it that way. If you're going to do a tic-tac-toe, a really great way would be to, instead of X's and O's, having to write words that start with the same sound, or now if it's in the middle, it has to have the same middle sound, or if it's this way, it has to have the same beginning sound, or just finding different ways to up the ante on it.
Yeah, I've done the tic-tac-toe with sight words that they have to, each person has a sight word that they have to write instead of their X or their O.
Great. Another question that came up about handwriting, maybe it's a little silly, but when is the right time for a child to learn how to write a cursive signature? We talked a little bit about handwriting, so when do we think that's a good thing to start to introduce?
I think first graders can do cursive signatures. It's fun. It's playing with words. Kids that have struggled sometimes doing the print, because it's separate letters. Sometimes it works better for them to actually learn cursive because they're tying the letters together, and it's easier when they're not lifting the pencil off the paper.
Great.
I was just going to say, when they're comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it's really about, and I think the signature is kind of like, well, until you got to sign something, you don't have to have the signature down pat. But the writing the letters, I think, to make it more about like all the different ways that you can write a letter versus now it is time to learn cursive. I think that all of it really aids all handwriting development, and like Ibris has been championing fine motor skills. The fine motor skills that you develop from practicing cursive or having fun with cursives or getting to think you're signing your name on things is a big hit with kids.
In the chat, someone earlier had said another thing about handwriting, that summer is a great time to sort of practice. If they're tired of holding a pencil, use chalk or paint or a finger or a stick to write it in the sand. So different ways to practice that motion that's not just sitting and writing, and practicing those fine motor skills, gross motor and fine motor skills. So that's great. Another question that came in that we can expand on is, can music, say song lyrics, be used in support and nurturing literacy and reading as well?
Definitely. Simple yes.
Yeah, and in the chat, Julia talked about Willoughby Wallaby Woo or Down by the Bay. Anything that has rhyme to it at the end is awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are also some great books that are songs. Over in the Meadow is a good one. So again, building rhyming as well as numbers, and that repetition. It's one I can think off the top of my head. So yes, building in that way. Let's see if there's any other questions here. A lot of people are anti-adulting. I agree. What about, so now there are these like games on like the Times not crossword puzzle, but word games that like adults do. is that something appropriate to do with your child maybe?
I think if they're interested in it, and there's different ways to make those games developmentally appropriate. I think some kids are just, it's like like how I was saying, it's just not their thing. It's not something they would like to do. I think at the end of the day, don't make them do anything that is not going to be appealing to them, but there's plenty of ways to make that crossword into a high frequency word crossword type of puzzle, or a sounds crossword puzzle, or phonemic awareness crossword puzzle, things like that. But if puzzles is not your kid's thing, then it's all going to go downhill very quickly. And that's not because your child's struggling at reading. It's because they don't like crossword puzzles.
I agree. It almost feels too much like school for some kids. That would be, a teacher would make them try to do a crossword puzzle. But more active things like hide Post-its with some words around, words that they can already read, hide it around the house, or put it on note cards and throw the note cards in the air, and the kids have to run and grab a note card, run it back to you and read it before they can go get another one. And you can have a competition with kids just running crazy through your living room, picking up cards and trying to figure out how to read them before they get to you. I don't know. Maybe it's because we had boys.
That also reminds me of using like Scrabble letters or bananagram letters and using those as tools. That again, with the practicing your letters and creating words instead of maybe in a set game, but making it into a game of like what we can do and using those as sort of the manipulatives of that. Are there? Oh, go ahead.
5, you know, their name is kind of like the biggest thing or the biggest word they might want to be working with. Put each letter on a popsicle stick, and you know, separating them and then having them put together. That's a puzzle style with a word that they're familiar with before they start school.
Great. And the chat, Julia said that she does, her second grader loves Wordle, because again, it's short enough to maintain his attention and help better understand letter combinations that go together. So, you know, again, depending on where your child is at. So we're going to start to wrap it up. Is there anything that else our panelists would like to share before we do so? Any other tidbits or tips, tricks, thoughts on our birth to second grade growing readers?
I would just add, for African American parents, don't feel the societal pressure to correct your child's English. There is nothing wrong with your child speaking African American English, speaking Ebonics, however you call it. It is a beautiful dialect, and it should be celebrated in the home and at school. And there is no reason why a child or an adult who speaks in a dialect will have any issue with learning how to read. If anything, you have to look at it just like another language. They are not bilingual, but they are bidialectal. And that is a superpower that I want all African American parents and families to no longer feel ashamed about. So speak on.
Great. Thank you, Logan. It's very powerful.
I don't remember the exact name of the study, but there was a study done where they put mics on babies to see how many words they were hearing per day. So that would be my recommendation to parents of little ones 0 to 5. If there was a mic on your baby, let's kind of like with your steps, you're trying to hit those 10,000 steps, make sure you're hitting 10,000 words with your little one every day, that they're hearing that. Some of the cultures, sometimes it's culturally that they're listening to less words. But again, the more words you talk to them, you teach them, you repeat to them, the easier then their communication and their literacy skills will develop.
Yeah. And I would just add, be kind to yourself, because like we got so much on our plates. If you have all these intentions of what you want to do and the end of the summer comes and you didn't do half of them with your kid, it's like, oh, well, that's like, we're doing the best we can. Everybody's doing the best we can.
Great. Well, Thank you to my panelists, especially, but thank you to everyone joining us here today. I know I really appreciated the conversation and opportunity to hear from many perspectives. I'm sure everyone in the room does as well. As we wrap up, we're going to again have a few resources to support your efforts for the summer. So Oakland Reads, which was mentioned, offers again those 2 ways to explore their site. First, we look at the reading skills overview page to learn about how reading works and the different skills that children need to develop to become successful readers. And then second, exploring that age grade level milestones that Logan was speaking about, to learn about what the milestones are and how you can support them at home. And then we've also created, oh, and there we go. And you can again get that code right there. We've also created at Go Public Schools a 1-pager to connect you to a handful of additional resources, and we'll link that into the chat. And be sure to join us for our second and our next literacy session next Thursday, May 18th at 5 p.m. We'll be focusing on the next set of readers, our 3rd through 12th graders, so later elementary school all the way up through high school, who need additional reading support. And the panel will again share practical tips and strategies to support your learner at home. And we will also put that RSVP link in the chat. And again, thank you all for being here, and have a great night.
Okay, say hi to Ibris.
Hey, Ibris.
Carter.
Hey, Carter.
Oh, Mr. Carter, look how big you are. 5 Center graduate. Thank you